Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to break down a really wild geopolitical theory. And it's all about how something as simple as a cheap drone could actually trigger a global nuclear crisis. Yeah, you heard that right. This is what's being called the Iron Dome paradox. All right, so let's get right into it. The whole paradox, it really starts with this totally wild imbalance. I mean, look at this. On one side, you've got these Iranian drones that cost, what, a few $1,000s? We're talking used car prices. But on the other side, the interceptor missile to shoot it down costs over $150,000. And this isn't just about the money. This cost difference is the entire foundation of a very deliberate military strategy. And that strategy? It's got a name. It's called attrition warfare. So the whole idea here isn't necessarily to land one big knockout punch. Nope. It's all about winning by just wearing the enemy down, draining their resources until their defenses, well, they just run out of gas. So here's how that works in the real world. According to analysts, Iran uses swarms, just clouds of these cheap drones, not just to do damage, but to saturate the sky. The main goal? Force Israel to launch its really limited and super expensive interceptor missiles. It's literally a strategy of trading pennies for dollars over and over again until the bank is completely empty. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory. We've actually seen a version of this happen before. A conflict that lasted just 12 days serves as this really critical and frankly pretty worrying historical precedent. Now, what's so important to understand is this distinction right here. This conflict didn't end with a victory or a defeat in the way we usually think about it. Instead, it was more of a tactical stalemate, a pause that was driven not by politics, but purely by logistics. So what happened? Well, according to several reports, Israel's Iron Dome was just about out of missiles. It was nearly exhausted from fighting off all those attacks day after day, and that forced a stop. The really crucial takeaway here is that this whole episode revealed a very clear vulnerability in what's supposed to be one of the most powerful defensive shields on the planet. Okay, so you might be thinking, why does a regional fight over missile stockpiles matter to the rest of us? Well, this is where we zoom out to the global chessboard, because the ripple effects, they are massive. The big concern is that a long, drawn-out conflict in the Middle East becomes a huge strategic distraction for the United States. It forces the U.S. to redirect critical military resources, like those Patriot missile systems, which, by the way, are already in short supply. And sources point out this could pull focus and hardware away from other priorities, like Ukraine and Taiwan, potentially leaving them in a much weaker position. And this is where you really see the strategic fallout. A distracted United States creates a massive window of opportunity for its rivals. Analysts suggest that Russia could look at this situation and think, hey, now's our chance for a new offensive in Ukraine. And at the same time, China might feel way more confident about asserting its claims over Taiwan, all while America has its hands tied elsewhere. But it's not just about military hardware. There's also a major geopolitical price to pay. The argument goes that if the West backs an intervention in Iran, while at the same time condemning Russia's actions in Ukraine, well, to a lot of nations, especially the BRICS countries, that looks like a huge double standard. And that, according to this view, just erodes the West's credibility and this whole idea of a rules-based international order. So this vulnerability we've been talking about, this risk of the shield just running out of ammo, it's led to two totally different ideas on how to solve the problem. One is all about offense, and the other is purely about logistics. Okay, so the first approach, which you see articulated right here, is all about being preemptive. It's offensive. The strategy is basically to go on the attack, to destroy Iran's missile and drone capabilities at their source. The idea is to completely eliminate the threat using what's described as overwhelming and decisive force. But then you have the complete counter-argument. And this perspective says the key isn't to attack Iran, but to make their attrition strategy totally useless. How? By constantly resupplying the Iron Dome, making sure there are never any gaps in its arsenal. The thinking is, if the shield can never be exhausted, the strategy to overwhelm it can never ever succeed. It's all about stability through defensive strength. And that brings us to the final and honestly the most frightening consequence of this entire paradox. What happens if that logistical solution doesn't happen? What if the defensive shield actually fails? This right here, this lays out the chain of events that people are so afraid of. First, the drone saturation continues. Then, the Iron Dome stockpiles run dry. And then, the defensive shield fails. And at that point, a conventional conflict could escalate into something far, far more terrifying. So here's the absolute bottom line of this theory. The Iron Dome isn't just a shield against rockets and drones. It's seen as the last firewall, the very last thing preventing a conventional war from potentially spiraling into a nuclear one. It really makes you think, doesn't it? Just how thin is the line between a defensive shield and a nuclear red flag? It's a really sobering question, and it's right at the heart of this very modern military paradox, where the cheapest weapon imaginable could, in theory, trigger the most devastating outcome of all. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.